You're listening to the Brilliant Breakthroughs podcast with your host, Maggie Moggin.
Hi, small business owners. Welcome to the Brilliant Breakthroughs podcast, where we focus on creating brilliant breakthroughs for the small business owner. FYI, this is also the name of the #1 Amazon best-selling business book series for small businesses. It's titled Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner, and the really cool subtitle is Fresh Perspectives on Profitability, People, Productivity, and Finding Peace in Your Business. You can get a digital copy or a paperback by going to Amazon. And the book we're referencing today is Volume 2, which has a really beautiful emerald green cover. Today's conversation is with #1 best-selling business author from the 2018 book, Clive Extence. I want to say hi, rock stars of the small business world. My name is Maggie Moggin, and I'm a #1 best-selling business author and creator of that #1 best-selling Brilliant Breakthroughs annual business book series. And by day, I am a professional master business coach and trainer at Brilliant Breakthroughs. So Clive, welcome and congratulations on becoming a #1 best-selling business author.
Thank you, Maggie. It's exciting.
Isn't it? It's sort of fun.
It is.
And now we have responsibility. Ooh.
Well, I wish I had a resume I could put it on.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So, Clive, let's talk about what you wrote about in the book. And everyone, Clive's chapter is the 3rd chapter in the book, and it's titled, It's All Management 101. And, I would love to ask you, Clive, something that seems rather obvious. Why did you even write your chapter?
Well, I had a number of different answers the times we were asked that question when we got together as group, as the authors did. And it just dawned on me today I could be more succinct. There's been literally thousands, probably tens of thousands of books about management.
Okay.
Seminars and research. And I still can't believe how mismanaged we are. We'd all be Six Sigma managers by now. I've probably read 20, maybe 25 books on probably 30, 35 books on management over the years, and not counting the seminars and that I've gone to. And what I hearken back to that, and it just dawned on me, holy mackerel, there's an awful lot of information out there. And I would say 90, 95, or even more % of it, if it's usually made into a book, it's pretty good information. I just can't believe it. Well, where's the gap? And it all comes down to what we talked about in the text in my chapter, and that's the action. We learn this stuff, we say we're going to practice it, and we may even probably practice it, and it falls by the wayside. We forget. It's too easy to fall back into what I term in my chapter sloppy, lazy management. It's just too easy. That's the easy route. It's the path of least resistance. It's what we're used to. It's what we're comfortable with. And all that newfangled change, that kind of falls by the wayside. And I see it as that. I see that's probably the biggest problem, at least from my perspective. So that's why I decided, it's all management 101.
It really is. And if we would just go back to the basics, oh my gosh, how wonderful it'd be, instead of, like you said, all the new fandango stuff that's out there. It's like basics are basics for a reason, right?
Yeah. I was talking to a young woman, an entrepreneur this morning at Panera's, and she asked me for some advice on what text she could be reading. And I said, why don't you start with one that was written in 1939? Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I said, that's probably been the biggest influence in my life as a manager and probably as a human being. There was so much blanket information, that umbrella information, and how to get along with people, how to deal with people. And I said, why don't you try reading that? That's a good base, a good start.
It's hard to believe that that's not quite 100 years old, but it's getting there.
It's getting there. Yeah.
And I think it's even more relevant as I progress through my career.
Right.
Do you see that as well?
Oh, I do. I do. We do tend to forget the basics, and we don't do an awful lot of introspection. We, meaning managers, we don't do a lot of introspection, and constantly. The other thing I was thinking about too is to become a good entrepreneur. I think, i.e., and manager, you need to always be a child. You need to be a sponge. You need to be ready for new information and ready to use that new information. And then you've got to be mature enough. That was the other thing that this young lady wanted to talk about, was where she could get good information on EQ, on emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. And
Right.
I think that deals with it. If you can read up and understand your emotional quotient of yourself, you can handle that change a lot better, a lot smoother. Change comes at you as it always does and always will, but you're able to handle it better because you're, number one, you expect it. Number two, open up a book or three and do the research, and you're better prepared for it. Makes it easier.
Yes, I remember reading in your chapter, you had suggested everybody pick up a book and do some research before they get all nutty trying to implement stuff, right?
Oh, we're culturally trained to make decisions quickly in this country. And I called it the John Wayne syndrome. That's our culture, you know. We expect the lone individual, strap on their six guns, hop on their horse, go out and win the West. And when it doesn't happen, off to the trash heap with them. But that's kind of the mental picture that you have of managers. They're trained to make quick decisions. I remember reading research about, we didn't even care in general, again, the bell curve in general, most people didn't care whether the decisions was right or wrong as long as their manager made a decision quickly.
Ah,
They appreciated that more than being right. So that always stuck with me. I said, well, that doesn't make sense.
no,
And it
that doesn't make sense to me either. I can't afford to do that as a business owner.
nope. But as an employee, when you're looking for leadership, we look to decisive leaders
Uh,
before even being correct.
well, that is very fascinating because uh, I have a gift of discernment. I'm trying to think where to start with this. I have a gift of discernment, and I'm very decisive and pretty swift, but that's not because I don't think something through. Matter of fact, I do spend a lot of time on it, and there'll be times where people ask me things, I'll say, I don't know about that. Let me get back to you because I want to make sure that I'm looking at it from all the different angles before I advise someone.
Exactly. And that's simple. That takes you out of sloppy, lazy management and moves you up into being a decent manager, because you say, I don't know, number one. And a lot of people are trained to think that that's a weakness, and it isn't.
Right.
And I'll get back to you. Let me do some research and I'll get back to you. So you're keep moving further and further away from sloppy, lazy management. The easy way is say yes or no without
So,
much.
okay, so that's a very distinct difference between efficient and effective.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Again, we all these things that we read about and write about and the research and all those actions we want to take, they're all great. They're wonderful when they work. They're all great, or they're not, depending on how we act upon them. So that's just that adds some nuance to the decision-making process. You don't have to, as I say in the text, in the chapter in our book, you don't have to get back. I'd say 80% of the time, you don't have to get back immediately. You don't need to make an immediate decision. You can say just what you do. Just no, wait a minute. Let me get back to you. Can I sleep on that? Can I do some research and then get back to you?
I agree with that 100%. We're,
Problem that sets you up for, however, is another sloppy, lazy management trap, and that is you don't get back to them.
oh, that follow-up thing. Oh, accountability. Okay.
Exactly. And that's
Okay.
why they fail. That's why good ideas fail when executed, because they're executed improperly.
Good ideas fail when they're executed. Because, can you say that again? Because?
Why good ideas fail. It's in their execution. We
Oh,
do this, we execute improperly, half-heartedly.
right. That's really cool. You may have said that phrase to me before or that quote, but I don't recall. Um, I think we have two gaps. One is we don't take enough time to strategize or plan, and thus the I'll get back to you, and or your comment about introspective, slowing down. Um, and then we just are horrific at execution.
Yes, I would agree. That's because
Okay.
it's hard. That's because it takes time. That's because it puts you, the manager, the owner, the business owner, in a more uncomfortable position.
Huh. Okay. Clive, with all of your experience, would you say that some of that may be from the fact that as we have our decision makers who are typically more tenured, that some of that is ego driven?
Uh, I would say that's on a par with my earlier statement that ego definitely gets in the way of proper management, proper
Okay.
leadership. It's not about pride, it's about purpose.
Uh, it should be about purpose, but often it's about pride.
And that's that ego. When
Okay.
ego rears its ugly head, you have problems. And the sooner, again, that's where introspection comes in, because we're all egomaniacs. We doing what would do if we didn't have a strong ego. But we have to under introspection allows us to put that ego and understand it and put that ego in check when it needs to be.
So that's a good way to stay in balance, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, cool, cool. I'd like to ask you another question because we're talking about learning and research, and I'm curious what you learned because here you are, you're tenured. You're tenured as a professional. You're even tenured as an instructor, as a professor at college level. And yet you took on a process that was new and that was about being a contributing author. So what did you learn from all that?
I learned you can still get scared when you're over 70. Not so much this time though. It's a good balance, but it was uncomfortable because it was new, and I knew I'd be working with younger adults, which is no big deal. That's fun, really. But in a different environment where it wasn't my ego then. I wasn't the professor standing up, walking around the class.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
I had to sit there and learn from the younger people, and it was really enjoyable. I remember being blown away by uh, by Kelly and her marketing as far as the internet
Mm.
and the information, the really logical, reasonable, current information she had about marketing through the internet. And that was all new to me. I figured, you just throw a bunch of stuff up there and you get your word out on all the different websites, and sooner or later people will start hitting it. Yeah, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It reminded me of one of the books I read. In fact, one of my old professors at Cardinal Stritch University wrote a book, and I forget the name of it now, but it was all about humor in the workplace. He took a sabbatical to go write his book on humor in the workplace and how that leads to greater productivity, because that's what people want. We don't want humor in the workplace. We don't want humor in the workplace unless it leads to greater productivity, right? Greater profit. But he
Okay.
was showing, his research showed that it does. Humor having a fun place to work. And I used to pose that question to my students in class. Who doesn't want to work where it's fun?
Yeah,
Or do you
right.
want to go to work where it isn't fun? Which one would you choose?
Okay. Well, I agree with that. So here you were, the professor as a student.
Yes.
Wow.
And I tried to practice what I would preach, and that is, it's your responsibility as a student to learn. I have a shared responsibility as a professor. The university has a shared responsibility in that we provide the opportunities. But guess whose responsibility it really is? You're not going to learn if you don't want to learn. So it's your responsibility to really want to learn. So that means if you can't understand the professor, or you don't like the professor, or you don't like the way he dresses, or what, you've got to put that all out of your mind. You're there to learn. That's on you. And that's how I went into this process with it. I knew I had my comfort zone with you, you know.
Right.
I said part of my chapter 2 is say trust the studies. And what I really mean by that too is also trust the process. And I said, I think every time we got together as a group, I would constantly reinforce that in my mind. Trust the process. Trust the process. This is new. I can't say anything pro or con about it. I just have to go with the flow. And we became #1 bestseller.
So clearly the process works. It is fascinating because people come in on different levels in management and leadership roles with an expertise already accomplished. And to remember that we have to trust a new process is not always easy.
No, it isn't.
And there's all that self chatter in our minds going full steam. And sometimes we just have to surrender into, oh, maybe there's a better way to do something. And I love learning, so I always embrace learning something new. And then, will it work? Won't it work? The only way to tell is experiment.
Right.
But I think there isn't enough experimentation. Therefore, we go back to, no, it won't work. And it's the quick answer, like we talked about before, where we may have the true answer right in front of us.
Yes. That's hard I don't care what level, unless you're really trained at it and you're experienced at it. Failure is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think Susan White talked about that fear of failure in her chapter.
Yes.
Defining success, but a lot of people don't succeed because of that fear of failure. And that's true. I mean, we've all been there. We've all gone through that. I was fear of failure with this process that you just described, with me. But okay, so we fail. But one of the things you always learn quickly is failure is sometimes a good thing. You learn a lot from your failures, and if you're
And
persevere and you're tenacious, you make it right the next time or the next time.
yes, I'm a firm believer of that. Experiment, experiment, experiment till you get the result that you seek, or you find out there was something better than what you even thought was possible.
Right.
So,
One of the
yeah.
terms we used in manufacturing, this is back in the 80s probably, was first brought into my lexicon was ready, fire, aim.
Ah. Yes.
You get to fail a little bit more often with that concept, but you understand the concept is that you got to move quickly.
Right, right. And yet I have to share with you, in small business, many of my clients have adopted that mentality and that approach, and they come to me and say, I don't get why I'm not building a thriving business. And I'm like, oh, I do. And it's almost easy because that's something that we can adjust.
Right.
And as soon as we adjust it, we start to get very different results. So yeah, I agree. That was back in the 80s. I thought it would have been even older.
No, because we were trying to change manufacturing technologies from a push system to a pull system.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
And so it was a dramatic change. So I think a lot of the researchers wanted to stress the fact that you've got to be quicker, you got to be more nimble, you got to be more responsive to the customer. The only way to do that is to set up a process. Obviously, you don't do it capriciously, but you set yourself up for success. But you set yourself up to be able to say, ready, fire, aim.
Fire, aim. Yeah. Okay. All right. So since we talked about ready, fire, aim, let's do. I have one more question for you. I am so curious what your answer is going to be to this. What would you have liked to have added to what you wrote?
Oh, probably another 2 chapters worth, maybe 3.
Okay. What sticks out?
A big one is I knew when I finished it and I got all the, what do we have to do, 3,500 words or something like that. And I got all of that. I wanted to add at least one more, and that was some of the fallacies out there. I talked a little bit about those axioms that we use in business that are completely incorrect in the chapter. But another one is the power of money and how we elevate money, recompense, how we elevate that salary in this culture that defines us.
Okay.
And again, it's another one of those things that is culturally driven, and it runs contrary to, if you do any introspection at all, it runs contrary to logic. I mean, at first blush, it's completely logical. Pay me more money. We've got movies that say, show me the money.
Yes, we do.
What's in it for me? And I'm a firm believer in Herzberg's two-factor theory. And he showed that money is probably, when it comes to motivational techniques, and it's so easy to say, well, show me more, give me more money, that'll motivate me. Well, it doesn't. In fact, Herzberg found money to be actually more of a demotivator than a motivator.
Right.
And I used to tell students, I gave them the stress, I'll give you a number of examples about myself and how that really came to pass, where I understood that. Number one, I worked for a company that didn't pay, I paid probably average, maybe a little bit less than average for a management position. Could have gone to Milwaukee and made 10 or 20 grand more a year. But I loved my work. I loved the people. I loved the culture. I understood it. I bought into it. It was part of me. We were simpatico. I don't think I ever, in almost 20 years, I don't think I ever went for a job interview other than within that company.
Wow.
And I could have gone to Milwaukee for more money. And I intuitively knew that it wasn't money for me. But I remember the first raise I got there. I was walking, it was a sunny day. I worked with a hardwood floor. I remember the glow of the floor, the sun coming. We had windows all around us. It was a gorgeous day. And I was a fairly new hire, and it was about 6 months into my new hire, and they called me in, and my boss called me in, and they gave me a 17.5% raise. And I came
Wow.
down, my head swollen, my chest swollen, boy, am I good. Walking around on air on those hardwood floors. And I remember that day, and I remember the next day, 6 months later in the dead of winter, walking around the same floors, shaking my head saying, they don't pay me enough money to work here. And that 17.5% motivated me for not quite 6 months. And if you think about that in your past monetary life, you'll recognize the same holds true for most of us. We get a raise, all good, I'm happy for a week or 2 or a month, and then all of a sudden I get back into the old I'm not happy again. So it's a fallacy to say money is a prime motivator. Obviously, you have to pay people well enough to earn a living.
Right.
That goes without saying. But over and above that, I would tell students, even if it were the prime motivator, and it isn't, like you would always stress that, it's the thing we have least control over. Everybody money all the time.
Right.
And
Okay.
there's a whole host of other scenarios I could walk through that just proves beyond a shadow of doubt that we don't work for money. I mean, we work to earn a living, yes. We earn to make money, and it's nice to, in fact, I would tell students that you better be prepared to pay a little bit better than average. But after that, I'd put the things up on the board that Herzberg found that would motivate people, and none of them added to the bottom line. None of them added to the cost of you have to pay for this. It was all in how you treat people.
Yes.
The biggest thing Herzberg found was a sense of achievement. That's what most of us want. Feeling a sense of achievement.
If we create a sense of achievement for others that we're working with, or even in life, period, for that matter. But, obviously we're talking about work right now. That will suffice in many ways, won't it?
Well, I would say that and the next 3 or 4 other things, which is like recognition and so, just common sense things, kind things that you can do. And you don't need to spend money for that. You just need to spend energy and time and thought.
Thought. Yes. And you address thought in your chapter very nicely.
Well, thank you.
Just to be mindful of the other. Okay, I bet there's something else that you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, probably a lot of other things. There was we talked this morning with this young lady, and I introduced her to the concept of I used to put these. It's not an acronym. An acronym is a word you can pronounce. These were just initials, MBWA, and you and I talked about this once before. Tool. Again, it's another really effective management tool, unless it's not. Management by walking around. Get to know your people.
Right.
But don't be afraid to discuss business with them. It's okay to find out that the dog was sick, and next time you come around and you ask them about how's the dog doing, or the kid's graduating and what's your kid going to do next. All that stuff is important, and it has to be heartfelt. That means you have to take the time, and you might have to take notes because you're going to come back 6 months from now and remind them of that. But always don't be afraid to talk to them about the business. What are you working on? How's quality been? How's the material that you're using? Is that improved any? Is it we've been working on this project. We'd like that. We wanted to renovate all the equipment. How's your equipment running? Things like that. Have you improved productivity? Have you improved efficiency? Don't be afraid to ask that. But more than that, don't be afraid. Don't be alarmed when they sit there tongue-tied because they've never been asked that before. Don't go running to their supervisor and complain about how stupid they are because they can't answer a simple question. I've had supervisors do that. That's a natural response. You and I may have done that, be tongue-tied when my boss, the CEO of the company, the owner of the company comes and asks me, what's productivity, quality? Oh my goodness. But do it every 6 months and be cool, calm, and collected about it, be sincere about it. And it'll only take 2 or 3 times and they'll be answering you with the answer you're looking for. And it focused their attention on the productivity because now, geez, the boss isn't talking about productivity and talking about quality. And that's the one, the MBWA that we are familiar with, management by walking around. But there's another MBWA.
Okay, and what's that?
Management by walking away.
Ah.
Another completely effective management tool, unless you misuse it. And that's a real critical one because I believe in management by walking away. That means you've trained your people enough, you've trained them in the culture, you've trained them in the process, you've trained them in everything where you can actually walk away and let them do the job.
Oh, what a novel idea.
Yes.
You train them, you give them every resource that they need to be effective, and then you let them do the job you ask them to do.
Feel a sense of achievement in the process.
Beautiful.
Motivator. Unless you haven't done that or you slipped up. Then they fail, and then you come and give them the boot for failing when you set them up to fail. And you have to understand everybody's different. Every employee would be different. Every customer would be different. And they all define failure the way they want to define it, what's best for them, human nature. So you have to make sure you let them know what failure means, what success means to you, to your business.
Clive, I'm thinking we should have had your subtitle for your chapter be Unless It's Not.
Unless it's not, yeah. I do have a tendency to overuse some of those statements.
Oh, I'd love to talk with you more, but we're short on time today, and we are going to talk more, just not at this moment. We have, what, 3 or 4 more episodes for you to...
You're the boss.
Yeah.
You tell me.
We have, I believe it's 4 more episodes for you to share and tell us all sorts of wonderful things of what it is and what it might not be. But listeners, we want to thank you. And there's a way that you can learn and engage with #1 best-selling business author, Clive Extence. Start by reading chapter 3 about management and maybe what it's not. Actually, no, Clive has excellent ideas. And not only does he share real points for you to take notice on, he also tells you how to act upon each one of those. Gives you a little action boost so you can try it like we were talking about and see what results you can get. So Clive wrote this really great chapter. It's all about Management 101, and it's a new #1 book release. And the book that we're talking about that Clive wrote, and this sometimes gets a little confusing because we have a book series. This is Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner, Volume 2, which is the green cover. And there's something else that's really cool, listeners, that you can do right now, which is you can go to your app store and type Brilliant Biz Book, all one word, Brilliant Biz Book, and download the app for free. Once you do that, you can go to click on Ask an Expert. Wow, I'm getting all tongue-tied here. Click on Ask an Expert, and you'll see Clive Extence's name. What you can do is you can type in a question that you have for Clive, and it will get sent to him in an email, and he will respond back to you. Won't you, Clive?
I will get back to them.
Okay, I think that's a really cool bonus because after listening to the podcast, sometimes some questions perk up. So you have Clive at your disposal. And I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom sharing today, Clive.
It's been my pleasure.
You rock. I'm so glad that you chose to share your wisdom with everyone. And listeners, we appreciate you listening to the Brilliant Breakthroughs podcast, where you learn about how to create more brilliant breakthroughs for your small business. Until next week, when we talk again, shine brightly.